Hi, everyone. Welcome to Module 4. Module 4 is going to cover measures of variability. So we're looking to see different standard deviations. We're looking at distributions and kind of what all of that means. So if we click into Module 4, it will bring us to our learning objectives. It'll bring us to our reading review. And of course, we want to look over these videos as we look over our MindTap work, because that will kind of just give a little bit more information. I know your MindTap has a lot of information for you guys, but I do give a few other videos just so you visually have something to kind of compare that to. Make sure you read your textbook first. That might help. And then you can watch these to kind of get a little bit more descriptive explanations of a few things. So standard deviation is really just kind of showing you what that means. So we know what the mean is, we know what the mode, and we want to now look at the standard deviation. So really those are just measures of spread. That's kind of what standard deviation is. So how spread out the data is kind of what we're looking at in terms of the standard deviation. So if you have a low standard deviation, you know that your data is closely gathered around the mean. And if you're have a high standard deviation, that usually means it's more dispersed over a wider range of values. All right. This video does a nice job of kind of explaining that when you do look at the standard deviation, the data has to be kind of like more normal in terms of like a bell curve to get a standard deviation that's accurate. So you just want to, watch that. It'll make a little bit more sense, and then you can apply it to your MindTap work. The second video talks about biased and unbiased samples. So if you're looking at gathering data, you want to make sure that you have an unbiased sample. And the biggest reason for that is because you want your data to be accurate. So if you don't have accurate data, then you're going to have invalid conclusions that are based on the data not being accurate. So the biggest thing is that you want to make sure that your participants that are involved in your study have an equal chance of being chosen. So if there's only one part of the population that's being surveyed or being collected for data, that could be a problem. So maybe you're looking at, math scores, right, for different schools. If you're only looking at, one sex, like male or female, then you're not getting the whole accurate depiction of that. Or maybe you're only looking at one age group, and you're then comparing it to other age groups, then that's a biased sample. That's not going to help you, because it's not a good representation of the population that you're trying to look at. And that of course would mean that there's an issue or an invalid conclusion that you're making when you're presenting that data. So again, statistics are great because you can get quantitative data, but when you don't gather that data correctly, that's when things get skewed, and that's when the information gets misinterpreted. So go ahead and watch this about different types of samples, and I think that'll be a little bit more clear for you. For your assignments, you're going to have your Chapter 4 MindTap, so make sure that you definitely go ahead and do that. And then for your discussion, you're going to do a little bit of digging for some of your bills. Okay, so to kind of have this idea of standard deviation to see if maybe some of your bills or your payments are normally just distributed. I give you an example of this. Okay, so you don't need an APA reference for this. This is you going out and finding this information, and this can be really with anything that you want. So we're learning about variance and standard deviation. So for this example, you can go find utility bills, right? And you can look for every different month and try to get as many as you can, whatever you can. And then you would add up all the different months. You would divide by the total amount of the months you were examining. So if I had January through August, I'd have 8 different months that I was looking at for my utility bills. So I'd add them all up. I would then divide by the number, which would be 8. And then I would get that average. All right. And then I would take each month and I would subtract the mean. So whatever that average is. So then I would get all these different numbers down here. And then I would take the square deviations of each of the month's costs. Okay, so then I would take these answers, I would square them. I would get an answer for each month. And then I would add up all of the square deviations. Okay, adding them all up. The variance is going to be the sum of the squared deviations divided by the original number of months that you had, which would be 8. And that's what your standard deviation would be. Okay. And that you're going to take the square root of that for that variance. And then you get a number. So for the question, is a standard deviation of 9, does that sound like a sensible answer for the distribution? So for this one, yes, it would be, right? Because you're looking at 8.7 in terms of 9. That would be pretty good in terms of these numbers. What you're going to do is you're going to review your own utility bills. It can be anything that you want. It could be a cell phone bill, a television bill, not something that stays constant like a Hulu bill or a Netflix bill, but something that maybe changes, right? And then you are going to provide the cost for each of them, and then you're going to find out whatever the standard deviation is. If for whatever reason you cannot find your bills and this seems like something that you just cannot do, make up some data points and then try to find the standard deviation, okay? So if you're going to say, well, I don't know what my power bill is, but I could kind of guess, maybe in January, it usually looks like this, but then in the summer months are a little bit higher because it's hot and I use the air conditioning more, something like that. And then just do the math on it and see what you get, okay? It's great if you can actually use your own bills because you can kind of see the difference of what is fluctuating each month. But you don't have to if you absolutely cannot find them. All right. So then you're just going to answer these questions. Again, you do not need to use APA references. This is just going out and finding the numbers, doing the math, and reporting your data. Okay. So that's going to be your discussion on top of your chapter 4 mind tap work. And I think that will do it for chapter 4. And I will see you in module 5.